The next call is a split call. Gareth Hughes, 5 minutes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. Mr Speaker, I remember my first budget day in this place. It was about 6 years ago, and I was staggered as the parliamentary messengers rolled in boxes and boxes of official budget documentation. Probably sat in the corner of the office for about a year. A few years later, they turned and I guess were a bit more innovative and brought in memory sticks for all the budget documents. And in 2016, all the documents were finally delivered to us online. So I guess Parliament's probably saved a small forest of trees, which is good. But the question I'd like to ask in this contribution in the budget debate is, does the budget see the forest for the trees? Because even though we've got this huge deluge of information and screeds of papers and forecasts and reports and models, it still treats people, communities and the environment as if they don't count. The problem is the budget and our complex economy is simplified into a few narrow measures like operating surplus, much like how our national success is measured primarily through GDP. It's kind of like a doctor measuring the health of their patient simply by looking at the contents of their wallet. Now, this budget measures gross domestic product, but it ignores quality of life. The budget forecasts a carbon price, but ignores the price of carbon pollution. The health budget focuses more on sickness than actual wellness or health. National's budget is full of numbers, but you can't measure the cost of the government's decisions. John Key's liberal when it comes to funding flags, but conservative when it comes to funding conservation. And tragically, a species like the Maori's dolphin gets given zero cost when it comes to accounting in the budget. It counts the number of people in work, but ignores the quality of the work, the personal satisfaction of the workers, or their precarious insecurity. It's a world that simply exists only on paper. It ignores the real world where a child in Whangarei is unable to get the special support they need to do well in school. Or the family in Canterbury who avoids swimming in their favourite river because they're scared of their kids getting sick if they put their heads underwater. Or a mother in South Auckland who tucks their kids into bed at night in the back of a car. The budget is the headline act of the year's political theatre, and it's a classic case of reporting the cost of everything, but knowing the value of nothing. I agree with the pundits. It was a boring budget. It was a political budget to set up tax cuts for next year. It was a short-term budget that abdicates responsibility to future generations of political leaders. And I would agree, it was obscene that this government spent an extra $500 million on the military and the spies, and not a single state house is going to get built as a result. It was farcical that this was pitched as an innovation budget when we see real-term cuts to tertiary education. And it's idiotic, Mr Speaker, to be spending money on cleaning up polluted waterways at the same time you're spending more money subsidising to pollute them. There is an alternative, though. One that treats people, communities and the environment as if they counted. The Green Party's been leading the charge for decades on genuine progress indicators, measuring the whole, not just a few narrow subsets, measuring what's important. Mr Speaker, the example I'd like to give is that once upon a time this was one of the richest countries in the world. We had full employment, free education and a caring state. We didn't leave people begging on the streets or sleeping in cars. Now Kiwis work some of the longest hours for some of the lowest wages and pay some of the highest cost of living in the developed world. We see a whole generation locked out of home ownership, but these failures are ignored as long as GDP goes up by a few percent. Now, Mr Speaker, they say you can't manage what you don't measure, and until we start to measure the things that are important, like quality of life, like communities, like swimmable rivers, we're going to continue to encourage smoke and mirror budgets, moving money around to achieve a few narrow objectives. Now, Mr Speaker, a green budget would be a budget for all. I have a vision that we can care about a richer New Zealand, not just a wealthier 1%. And today in the hall next door, we saw the beginnings of it. We saw a history in the making and a new government in the making when Andrew Diddle, Annette King, Materia Ture and James Shaw agreed to commit to working together to change the government. Next year we can see a new government govern in the national interest, not just in the National Party's interest. There is a new government in waiting, ready to deliver good jobs, share the economic gains with everyone, not just National's corporate mates, and invest in people and education, a government with values, not prepared for kids to go hungry at school or families to sleep in garages. With New Zealanders' support, National's 8th budget could well be their last.